Hello, and welcome to this episode of Self Sovereignty. And our guest today is Donalee Gastreich. Donalee is a best-selling author, a business coach, a guest lecturer, and a trainer specializing in human behavior and focusing on personal empowerment, leadership, managing for anxiety and stress, and personal growth. Donalee, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you for having me. And yeah, the book was a real treat, sort of a surprise and delight, really. My own personal journey was one of always finding myself at the rock bottom in life, and then knowing this wasn't it, like there was more.
In your book, you have, I guess you'd call them three tenets. So basically, awareness, and then being, and curiosity. So I'd like to touch on that a little bit and
Yeah.
have you kind of explain what that means in the context of spirituality and business.
Okay, so I call it the ABCs to mastering you and your results.
Mhm.
And I don't mean mastering by control or force. I mean by choice. I mean by reflecting and tuning in to all that you are, right? So the A, I teach it like there's one skill, one practice, and one process that we need to develop and hone in to all that we do so that we can be empowered and choose the right choices in every situation. The first one is a skill I teach because you don't own it as a practice until you start practicing it, right? And a skill is something you say, oh, I'm going to learn. It's awareness, and we're being self-aware. We're learning to reflect on, how do I feel? What are my thoughts? Are they in alignment with my goals?
Yeah.
What are my beliefs and my core values? Because oftentimes we've adopted our beliefs and core values from our parents, our upbringing, our culture, our environment. And sometimes they're not totally ours and they need to be shifted a little bit. So the book's really about getting really clear on awareness and taking first just the baby steps of self-awareness, then social awareness. How does what I say affect another? How do they react and respond to it? And then it goes into even further, because there's business awareness and organizational awareness, right? That I touch on in the book as well. And that's really for organizations to take this work deeper. But the second tenet is being. And this is where I bring in and introduce that we have more than one intelligence system living and operating within us. And I teach that we have four intelligence systems: an IQ, EQ, PQ, and SQ. And until we're in balance and harmony with all four, we aren't living into our power. And so the whole second chapter of the book is teaching us to engage in and work with all that we are.
And I love that. And I think, the people don't spend that much time on the self-awareness component. And they don't realize that their own perceptions of who they are based off of the perceptions of them from others. And so it's, you go through life and you're doing what you think you need to be doing, but deep down inside, it may not be what you were meant to do or what you're born to do or what you should be doing, and it's important to step back and really kind of, do that self-awareness, self-analysis. And I know in the book, you've got, a great questionnaire or survey for self-awareness to help guide people. And I love that. It's just so critical. And the second part of that is, it kind of leads to what you were just talking about, with emotional intelligence, because I think out of the four, that's the area that we probably don't spend that much time with. And I'd love to hear, your perspective on those four intelligence sections, but also the emotional component and the value of that.
Yeah, the value's huge. I believe our emotional intelligence is the GPS to guide us through
Mm,
things in life. The key is that you don't respond in the middle of an emotional wave. And oftentimes we don't know that we have permission to pause, that we don't have to respond in this moment, that we can excuse ourselves and say, wow, that was a lot. Or, I'm feeling overwhelmed by all that we've just shared. And I'd like to think about it and come back to you with a response. If ever you're acting out of an emotional wave, scientifically, what's really happening in that moment is that emotion is rising so high and so full that it's pushing your main personality out of the way. And you're projecting that trauma and that pain that's coming through in that emotion. So if you've just gotten triggered, don't respond in the middle of the trigger.
Yeah.
Observe it, let it move through you, breathe, move. And, oftentimes we don't know what it takes to let emotions move through us. And we need to educate ourselves on what it takes to allow emotions to move. And in the first part of the book, I bring in awareness because we're laying the foundation for what's to come. I sectioned the book into 3 sections: educate, engage, and empower. So the first part, I bring in awareness so that we can lay the foundation. And there's a real key component in awareness where we get to observe.
Yeah.
And being that observer, we detach just a little bit from all the emotion that it was bringing in. We can see how we felt. We can notice anxiety starting to build. We can notice how uncomfortable we are in our own skin. And we can start to observe ourselves through a different lens, right? To me, this is truly the lens of love, right? Not fear. Reacting in the middle of it is the fear part, right? Thinking we have to respond, we have to react. They did this to me. And no one's doing anything to us. But people are beautiful messengers to show us what we most need to see in ourselves.
And I love that you went right there to the observer, because I wanted to touch on that, and you mentioned it a few minutes ago. And so that's awesome. I love that perspective. And I love, like you said, in the book, if, slowing down, you don't have to respond right away. Slow down your words, take time to kind of think about it and disengage from that situation a little bit, and give yourself some time to kind of compose your idea away from an initial emotion. Respond instead of react is a good way to phrase that. And often what you find are kind of your emotions that are in the shadow, I guess. So maybe if you can kind of elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, that's a really big topic. We could really go over it in an entire weekend workshop, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah, but to just squish it down into a little window, I would say we struggle with emotions mostly because we were never taught how to process them, how to feel them fully, how to experience them, and how to even craft the right story around them. So oftentimes, our parents got upset, something was said, we processed what it meant as hurt, as pain. And in feeling hurt and feeling pain and not letting it move through us, we'd label it, we trap it within ourselves. And when I say ourselves, we're just energy and motion. So we've got an energy body, physical body, we've got a mental body, we've got an emotional body, a spiritual body, all these different levels and dimensions of who we are trap these emotions. And then it's stored in us for later recall.
Yeah.
And that recall happens when we least expect it. It could be something your boss is saying, or your spouse, or your loved one, or your son, or your neighbor, or someone out in the grocery store just says something, and it just sparks a familiarity to that past trauma. And wow, the emotion just rises. But it's our focus on it as bad and labeling it that causes it to stick around, right?
Yeah.
And it isn't until we get to look at it, like, what if I said nothing in this world was really labeled with any meaning? You give all the meaning to everything in your life.
Yeah, and if we don't do that self-work, and really try to understand who we are and what we believe in, and kind of clear out some of those things that are, in our shadows that have caused so much emotional damage, it gets us to a situation where we will respond or react right away. And most of the time we don't realize that's just somebody else's perception of who we are or whatever, and they're dealing with something in some way, and we can't take that as personal. We have to be able to separate that and for what it is, and not get our feelings hurt as easy.
Yeah.
It's really, really
Yeah.
hard.
I'll share with you something that I brought into adulthood. My dad would get angry and raise his voice.
Mhm.
And whenever he did, there was turmoil, chaos in my household. He might throw things, he might hurt someone was crying, someone was suffering. And I took that into my adult life. And the first time my husband raised his voice, wow, my defenses started
Mm.
flaring, right? Like my insecurities, I felt I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel secure. And in a human experience, we have a need to feel safe and secure. And when that's violated, wow, we're going to do whatever it takes to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
So that could be raising your voice back. It could be fleeing. How do we respond in that mode of not feeling safe and secure? Generally, we're either going to flee, fight, or freeze.
Mhm.
And knowing what your go-to is under different circumstances is so important, because then you can deal with it. Then you can address it when it shows up and know this is a component me. In business, I would freeze a lot. If I didn't have answers to what's my next step in business and where am I going, I would freeze and I would just procrastinate. I would stay in a mode of procrastination. Well, now I can see that about me,
Mhm.
right? In my relationships, I would fight because that's what I saw my parents do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I would fight with my spouse. I would raise my voice and try to be louder than him so
Yeah.
he could hear me over his yelling.
Yeah.
And when I could reflect and see myself, I was like, oh my God, I was so miserable. Like my blood was boiling. I was acting out an image of someone that wasn't me.
And
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 none of it felt healthy or right.
And it's just amazing how much that we pick up from the environment around us
Yeah.
within our first 6 or 7 years, where we're just kind of like little sponges walking around, learning from our parents and teachers and siblings. And, you know, we pick up beliefs and self doubts, limiting beliefs, even though they may not have been intentionally harmful. There are things that we pick up that, for whatever reason, emotionally, we perceive that as a fear or an anxiety, and that's where we have to be able to kind of work through that and do that self worth to get us back to kind of where we need to be.
Yeah, I think there's part of our human experience that
Hmm.
when you really understand the humanness of us, we're conditioned by our environment, our work. If we work in an office, there are rules and procedures and processes that are conditioning us to conform, right, to those rules within the office. When you walk into church, their protocol is quiet, right? So you oblige, you conform, right? You're being conditioned, right? And a lot of our conditioning is good, right? It's really good and healthy and helps us to commune together in
Hmm.
community and respect one another. But there are a lot of conditioning that don't serve us. Let's just take COVID. A lot of people still are in fear of other people after COVID.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm not here to tell anyone how to think or how not to think. But I like to ask one big question. Do you view this world you live in as friendly or fearful. Because however you view it then reflects everything else you do.
Yeah.
How we do one thing is how we do everything. You know,
Right.
my ex-husband was notoriously late for things, and he used to say, well, it never affects my job. And within a month, it was affecting, he was being shown that it does affect his job. So yeah, you may think it only affects certain areas of your life, but we're creatures of habit. And that process you got going on, if you're always tardy, always late, the underlying theme has a story going with it. And we need to look at what those are so we can dismantle them and create
Understand the meaning behind it.
yeah, and tell stories that really do serve us, right?
So yeah. So awareness, being, and then the third C is
Oh,
curiosity. I found this one interesting.
so curiosity is the one that keeps the other two intact, right? And it keeps you from thinking you know it all,
Yeah.
right? It keeps you from bringing your past knowledge into this now moment. And this one was really something I had to experiment with a lot. And I say it in the book over and over and over again. Don't believe me. Put on your own experiment, right? Because you're here to learn your way. And you're here to learn your truths, your core values, your purpose, your mission, gifts. Each one of us has these innate gifts that are just seeking expression out in the world. And we're here to contribute in really big, bold ways, right? You know, me leaning into my book was this boldness of bringing spirituality into business, and not just business, but into the business of everything we do, our health and well-being, our relationships, and our contribution in the world, our career, our business, our focus, our, you know, whatever we do for a livelihood in the world, but also into our time and money freedom. We weren't here to, you know, to live in poverty.
Yeah.
And that too is a mindset that's been conditioned upon us. So yeah, this whole spirituality approach, I invite people in the very first chapter to get really curious. You know, we need to use this curiosity in so many ways as to, you know, what do I really think? And is it true? What do I know about it? What if I explored it more deeply? What would I find out? What I found in my journey was when I got quiet, this inner voice, this higher guidance, this higher self spoke to me and guided me to everything I needed. And writing the book was really me leaning into this higher knowledge to let the words come through me when I sat to craft the book. And it was really a point in my life where I had to shift and change in big ways. We pick up habits. I felt like when I became a mother, I trusted this inner voice inside me in a big way, because I didn't have an owner's manual to what it looked like to be a mother.
Right.
But I trusted the power that put this life in me was going to be there every step of the way if I was open to receiving that knowledge and insight. And I also went into sales right before I ever got pregnant and became a mother. And too, my whole sales career wasn't, I didn't have a bachelor's degree. And in the 80s, women in sales was not a common thing. It was very uncommon.
Yeah.
So I too knew that landing that position was going to require me to pull from that higher intelligence within me. And I talk about it in the book as a spiritual intelligence. It's a system that we all have access to, an intelligence. You know, right now, my daughter-in-law is pregnant with my second grandchild. And her body is so intelligent. It's nurturing and feeding and serving her a new life in her womb, and Maple, her 1-year-old, through her breast milk.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
3 lives. The intelligence system in the human body is so remarkable. I could fall and sprain my ankle, cut my hand, and break my elbow. And my body is going to go do what it needs to trap the inflammation in these areas, coagulate the blood, stop the bleeding. It's going to do what it needs to do to heal me. I don't have to put forth the thoughts, right? Like,
Right.
but it's also sending us signals day in and day out. The physical body is always speaking to us, but what do we do as humans? We reach for Tylenol or ibuprofen and numb the
Yeah, we
signals.
know that. Yeah.
Our intuition is always guiding us, but are we listening? And if we listen, do we act upon it? Do we take those action steps to do what it informed us to do? Sometimes it's simple as call mom or call your daughter. And
Yeah.
then we tell a story. Oh no, it's not a good time. They're busy, right? Like,
Yeah. And it sounds like that curiosity aspect is really that action item to kind of lead us to do that. And you talk about the shift and change and knowledge and insight, and that kind of leads you to, I think, that living a life empowered. So you've got a whole chapter in the book about living life empowered, and also, again, how that relates back to awareness, which you're categorizing as that's really your superpower. Your awareness is your superpower.
Yeah. Well, in the beginning, it is a skill because you have to learn to utilize it. But as you start to master it, it's really a field that you step into. It's the present now moment where you don't bring the past or the future in it with you. You're here to learn anew. If you bring the past, you're labeling something and knowing what it is, when I want you to be curious, right? I want you to be curious as to what this now moment is here to show you, because I want you to realize the spiritual intelligence is at work and at play in everyone's life, always. But until you come present to this now moment, without an agenda, without your past knowing, without, it's really hard if you have people in your life that you have a judgment about. Like I just spoke to someone today and he says, what I've learned in my 63 years of life, he said, was that a tiger doesn't change its stripes. Well, if that's your belief, you're not giving that person an opportunity to show up differently. You already have a preconceived past memory that they're going to do this certain thing. And guess what?
Right.
The universe is going to deliver that to you.
Yeah. And so when you're entering into the workforce, especially if you're a manager or a leader, and you've got that level of preconceived assumptions about individuals, how does that affect your business, your team? And so that's the interesting thing, is how do you tie all this back into, from an individual, into the value proposition for businesses?
Yeah, it's the value for business is priceless. It's a game changer for businesses. When leadership and the entire organization take this book and go through it together week by week, they start, first of all, knowing themselves. The subtitle of the book is Know Yourself, Grow Yourself, Live Life Empowered. So as you begin to know yourself, you begin to know that everyone has these same gifts and talents and insights that you do.
Yeah.
And then we start to trust ourselves then we start to trust another. When we can see our coworker, the value they bring, the whole dynamic shift. Engagement comes naturally from inside out. Our need to see diversity and embrace it comes from within, instead of trying to be forced inside from DEIB training, right? What does that DEIB training lack? Awareness for the individual to see their inner bias. Awareness is your superpower, but it's also the prerequisite. It's It's the first skill we need to embrace and master before we can do anything. Complex problem solving, critical thinking, all these things that are future needed skill sets come naturally when you embrace awareness.
Yeah, I love that. And I think just from an organization business perspective, just to be able to say, hey, yeah, we as an organization value this. We value this as much as we value your physical health or your mental health. And so take time, yeah, put some time together as an organization to help individuals, go through the book, go through your program, and learn about who they are individually and bring that back to the organization, for the good of the organization as well, right?
Yes. And you mentioned on two key components, I think mental and emotional
Mm-hmm.
stability, resilience, coping skills are greatly enhanced through this book. It works on and deals with the emotional and mental intelligence systems, right? So when we embrace all of these intelligence systems, we're growing them, we're empowering them, but we're also becoming more aware of our inner resilience. We're strengthening our coping skills to bounce back when we lean off track, right? It's easy in the human experience to get caught up in a thought or an emotion for too long. Grief is one of the most challenging aspects that any human can process and work through, right? So loss, a divorce, I mean, these things are surmountable, they're impactful. And if you don't have the right team of support or the right knowledge or coping skills to work through these things, you struggle with them way too long. And then we create habits and patterns that keep us depressed and in loops of thinking that don't serve us. So I believe that the book is the means to, one, address everything that's going on in businesses today, from the dysfunction, the disengagement, the dissatisfaction, as well as the mental and emotional instability that's being seen in the workplace right now.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, they call it the Great Resignation. As much as we're seeing people leave the workplace, there's just as many in the workplace who have quietly quit, meaning they're engaged and satisfied in their work. They're really not being productive. They're not fully on board.
That's interesting. Yeah. There's
Yeah.
a cost to that too, for the individual as well as the organization.
Both, you're right. The greatest thing about the book is it creates a win-win-win for all.
Yeah.
Like, it literally is a game changer for businesses. And I invite them to do the book club. Go through this in every department, every division, to meet in smaller groups with your coworkers, with your team, your direct team. Because as you begin to know more about yourself and share that in the group, they get to see parts of you they didn't know. That gives them greater respect for you.
Yeah, it
Right.
humanizes them,
Yeah.
And I did see a little bit of that with COVID in that, everyone was working from home. Everyone had the same challenges where all of a sudden you're on Zoom meetings and it didn't matter whether you were a worker bee, a manager, director, or an executive vice president. If the kid comes into the room while you're in an important meeting, all of a sudden your child might come in there, hey dad, hey mom, kind of a thing, and you see the executives kind of get a little bit flustered too, but everybody loves that. You want to see their family side, you want to see their human side, and that's the one piece of COVID that I think really did kind of change, maybe in a positive side.
Yeah.
I'm going to put the book up here, on the video when we go through and edit in your website and contact information. But you mentioned the book club, and I want to circle back to that because I know you offer the book club and workshops at an organization level, but
Yes.
anyone can buy your book and anyone can join the book club on their own.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I would love to offer this out to your audience. get the book. If you want to get the book, I also have a 100-page companion workbook. You don't need it. In the introduction of the book, I tell you, get a journal, right? Get a 3-ring binder or a blank, journal where you can write in and keep notes, because at the end of every chapter is an invitation of questions to take you deeper to knowing you. The book isn't telling you who you are. This is your exploration, your journey, your growth, and it truly is the path to empowerment. So I invite you in to a book club, and my offer goes out till October 7th. So I think that's like 10 days from now, maybe something like that. Today's the 26th.
Yeah.
If you join the book club, if you get the book, you can get it from my website or you can get it from Amazon. You join the book club, go to my website. There's a barcode or a QR code that you can scan, or the website's listed in the introduction of my book. Go there and choose the pay in full version of the book club. It's 29 weeks of working together. That's 7 months to reprogram, recode, reskill you back into your power, health, relationships, and work, right? In all areas of life. Use the coupon code with love, all lowercase, squished together, no spaces, with love. And I'm getting you in the book club for $1. $1 is all you have to invest.
Oh my gosh.
When you use with love,
yeah,
it backs out the full fee and all you pay is $1.
Oh, so, thank you so much. That is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The real power comes when we talked about earlier being conditioned by our environment. This is an opportunity for all the listeners, everyone who picks up the book, to be empowered by a peer group of support that all thinks like them.
Yeah.
If you've read Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, he talks about the power of a mastermind group.
Yeah.
That power is brought forth in the book club. Jesus talked about it in the Bible and said, when 2 or more gather with the same motive, missions, insights, the results are 10x, right? You're really going to get a lot more when you create this powerful group, because you're going to hear others sharing and you're going to gain insights to, oh, I noticed that too, but I couldn't put the words to it.
Yeah, I love that. And in other group settings that I belonged in as well. I mean, someone can say something and then, it'll trigger. It's like, it goes back to that observer. It's like, yeah, I've kind of felt that too, in certain situations, an insecurity or a way you react or respond to something. And it gives you an opportunity to kind of explore that, become more self-aware there, maybe even change it at a subconscious level. And you get into the subconscious mindset component of it a little bit in the book as well. And I love that.
It's good stuff. It's way more to discuss on a call like this, but it truly is a game changer for business and a personal empowerment tool for individuals.
Yeah.
And here's what I will say. No matter what your level of awareness, it has something in it to grow you. You will advance from wherever you are. And it's one of those books that you could pick up again next year and allow it to take you further. So
yeah, and I think you should too, because I think, going through chapter by chapter and answering the questions or pondering, reflecting, it'd be neat to go back through a year later and compare your journal and see, how you've transformed over a period of time.
Yes, absolutely. You mentioned the awareness assessment in the beginning of the chapter. I also invite the reader to go to my website and download a pre-start assessment to assess where they are so they can measure the results just reading the book.
Yeah.
And then to go back and do a finish assessment at the end. It's the same assessment they took in the beginning, but I want them to take it again at the end of the book and just see what reading it brought forth for that.
I think that's great. That's very exciting. Yeah. Well, I know you probably have to go. We've had great conversation, went over a few minutes. I appreciate you staying on. And I'll put your contact information up and the book information, maybe a link to the book. But in closing, you've got your book club. Anything else coming up we should watch for? Do you do Instagram messages and social media and all that, or?
I do. I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook.
Okay.
And I will be speaking publicly at Venture Cafe. I think it's the third Thursday in October. Let's see if I
Is
have.
that online? Is
It's
that
actually the 13th. It's the 13th of October, October
Okay.
13th. And Venture Cafe is down in the CIC, the Cortex community
Okay.
of St. Louis. I don't know if your listeners are local or not.
Worldwide.
Okay, worldwide. So yeah, that really wouldn't matter. It needed to be
Yeah,
something
yeah.
more on a bigger perspective.
That's awesome. All right. Well, again, thank you so much, and thoroughly enjoyed reading the book. I'm going to go back to the book. I'm going to do self-assessment. I didn't go through it the first time, but I'm going to go back through it. But I truly appreciate you taking time to meet with us and kind of step us through it today.
Thank you for inviting me. And the only thing I want to leave your listeners with
Yes,
is
yeah.
there's greatness in you. And I aim to let this book unpack more of your greatness.
Love that. All right. Thank you so much, Donalee. It's good talking to you. Bye.